Passengers were awakened at 4 in the morning and asked to donate blood because the ship was too far from land for anyone else to help. Days earlier, on that same ship, a prank triggered a full emergency search that had people in tears on the pool deck for over an hour. When you're hundreds of miles from shore, the crew serving your drinks and folding your tally animals are the same exact people that are running the emergency response, and the only backup is the person in the cabin next to yours. Plus, one cruise line just quietly snuck in more nickel and diming. They started charging for food that used to be included, and another just revealed a 3-story family suite that some people are convinced was an April Fool's Day joke. Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. Passengers aboard Oasis of the Seas were sound asleep on an 8-night Southern Caribbean sailing when at 4 in the morning, the intercom came on asking for blood donors. Not a drill, not a test. A crew member on board was losing blood and the ship was too far from land near Cuba for a helicopter to reach them in time. Now here's what most people don't realize about cruise ships. They don't carry blood banks. They're pretty basic. The medical centers on board can handle some things, stitches, broken bones, stabilizing someone for transport, but it's not like they're stocking blood for transfusions. So when someone needs blood at sea, the only option is passengers. And that's what happened here at 4 in the morning. So the ship's intercom came on asking passengers with compatible blood types to please come to the medical center. Out of the roughly 3,000 guests on board, only about 10 met the criteria and came forward, and kudos to them for that. By most accounts, the crew member received the help that they needed, although of course Royal Caribbean hasn't released details about the outcome. They usually stay pretty tight-lipped about this stuff. Now, what makes this worth talking about is that it reveals a gap most cruisers never consider. You're on a ship with thousands of other people in a medical center the size of a small urgent care clinic, and I unfortunately have made a couple of visits to those myself. Again, they're pretty rudimentary. There's no ambulance coming, there's no hospital down the street. And if that ship is out in open water, the people around you are the medical infrastructure. That's a sobering thing to think about, especially when you're on these longer itineraries or you may have health issues or you may be older. So here's what you can actually do. Travel with documentation of your blood type. Make sure that your travel insurance, and have travel insurance, I can't stop saying that enough. Make sure it covers medevac, which is the emergency medical evacuation by helicopter. And shocker, most basic policies do not, and it's exceptionally expensive. And know that ships can and do divert to the nearest port when the situation is serious enough. And I've cruised enough that I've now been on several cruises where that has actually been the case. We've had to reverse course to get someone back to land to medical emergency treatment. And I've also been on a cruise where a passenger had to be medevaced. The blood donor call is a reminder that the safety net on a cruise ship is real, but it's thinner than most people assume. And that story alone makes the point about what happens when things go sideways at sea, because just days earlier, on the previous sailing of that exact same ship, a completely different type of emergency played out, and this one was entirely preventable. A group of teenagers on Oasis of the Seas during a 6-night Eastern Caribbean sailing told one girl's grandmother that the girl had fallen overboard. The grandma panicked and alerted the crew, obviously. Now what happened was a full man overboard response. And if you've ever seen this or seen it on social media, you know what happens. That ship slows, the crew immediately is launched into search protocols, the Coast Guard is contacted, and for 90 minutes, everyone on board was told that someone might be in the water. Passengers described the atmosphere obviously as super tense, very frightening. People near the pool deck were crying. Some of them were genuinely bracing for the worst. Well, then the crew found the girl. She was just fine. She had been in her cabin the entire time. Her friends thought it was a joke. Now, the reaction online, and probably on the ship, was immediate and furious, with comments ranging from ban them for life to calls for the family to cover the cost of the search. And while Royal Caribbean hasn't, of course, publicly said what consequences the teens faced, the broader point is hard to ignore. A prank by a handful of kids triggered a multi-agency emergency response, traumatized hundreds of passengers, and delayed the ship for over an hour. The crew time, the Coast Guard coordination, the operational cost of slowing a ship of that size, these are the same resources that would be needed for a real emergency, like a blood donor call at 4 in the morning. So obviously very serious, and I join the calls of the people that say ban them for life. And yeah, they're just kids, they're teenagers, but I don't care. If you're 17, you're a teenager, you're old enough to know better. That's like getting on an airplane and saying the B word. Yeah, don't do it, and if you're stupid enough to do it, you're gonna have major consequences to pay. So we're talking 2 back-to-back sailings on the same ship, one very real emergency and one fake one. And in both cases, every person on board felt the impact. So the crew making your drinks are, again, those same people that have to respond to a man overboard call or go door to door asking for blood donors before sunrise. So sometimes on a cruise, we think there's just like these specialty crew and these groups of people that are ready to jump into action and these emergency response medical teams. A lot of times cruise ships, they have very small amounts of medical staff. And again, the rescue staff, these are the people that are making your tally animals a lot of times. So if you're booking a cruise, especially a longer one with significant time in the open water, it is worth understanding that the safety infrastructure, it's real, but it's finite. So again, know your blood type, all that jazz. Now, speaking of Royal Caribbean and some more pleasant Royal Caribbean news, it's not all gloom and doom and fake pranks. Royal Caribbean gave us the single biggest ship announcement of the year this week, and if you need something lighter after those two heavy stories, this one qualifies. Hero of the Seas. Well, it's official. It is the 4th Icon class ship arriving in Miami in August 2027, and it's going to start with 7-night Eastern and Western Caribbean sailings, and every single one is going to stop at one of my favorite private islands, Perfect Day at Coco Cay. I'm super excited. I'll actually be on Star of the Seas, my first Icon experience, at the end of this month, so I'm really excited about that. Now, let's talk about some numbers, right? Because this is a big one, right? And we keep seeing this race. All the cruise lines want to get bigger and better and fancier and more big numbers and all this kind of stuff. So it has 9 pools, the most of any cruise ship, 28 dining venues, also a record, and the return of a Category 6 water park and 2 new family raft rides. I hate water slides, but I can hang with some raft slides. Those are okay. Including the first funnel raft slide at sea. My 13-year-old is obsessed with water slides. She's going to be super happy about this. But the thing that went viral, got the most attention, is the ultimate family treehouse. This is a pretty baller stateroom. It is a 3-story suite that sleeps up to 12 people across the 3 decks with a rooftop terrace, a teen hangout, and a private whirlpool. Holy crap, I can't even imagine what this thing's gonna cost. Now, when this started circulating online, being that it's early April, people were convinced that it was an April Fool's gag, but it's not. Royal Caribbean, they're going all in on bigger is better and on the concept of multi-generational family travel. And this ship is the clearest signal yet on where they think the demand is headed. The Royal Railway dining experience, which I've done, is pretty cool. It returns with a new Heroes Station theme, and there's a brand new concept called Orleans Parish Supper Club. That's kind of that NOLA Cajun Creole food and like live jazz stuff. So if you're already thinking about 2027, that Treehouse Suite is probably gonna sell fast based on the buzz. But again, I gotta look at the pricing because I know it's gonna be pretty shocking. Now, a few other things happened this week that is worth knowing about. Norwegian Cruise Line, nickel and diming, that's what these cruise lines do. They quietly started charging $5 for every extra entree after your first one in the main dining room. Yeah, you heard that right. 1 entree included, and everything after that cost extra. Now, this is not entirely new. Other cruise lines do it. I'm actually gonna be leaving tomorrow to go sail on MSC. They're one of the first ones that started implementing this, and sometimes they say this, but they don't actually enforce it unless people try to take advantage of it. So it remains to be seen if this is actually a real thing or if it's just in the rules. Now, Norwegian is also tightening up on room service. Breakfast is now limited to 1 hot item and 1 cold item per person, and the all-day menu caps you at 2 items total. Now, for a cruise line that markets itself as included dining and also as more elevated than the traditional contemporary cruise lines, this is a pretty big update that might upset some Norwegian fans. If you're a family of big eaters or someone that likes ordering a backup entree just in case, or you're a big fan of room service, that's real money that can add up over a 7, 8, 9 day sailing. And it's worth noting, this wasn't announced with fanfare. This is the trend that we keep seeing the cruise lines do. They're not making this public. Obviously, they know people are gonna be upset about it, but they kind of sneak it in there. So you gotta be careful. You gotta watch YouTube, right? And you gotta stay on top of cruise news. Otherwise, you're gonna miss this kind of thing. In other cruise food news, let's talk about Carnival. Carnival's brand ambassador, John Heald, love this guy. He deals with crazy stuff and crazy people, but he does a great job. So kudos to you, John Heald. He went on the record this week to explain why Guy's Burger Joint closes in the late afternoon instead of staying open into the evening. And I am glad that he addressed this because as a big fan of Guy's Burger, I actually would say this. I know it's a hot take. I actually think Guy's Burgers is some of the best food at sea amongst all cruise lines. Yes, I stand by that. Carnival PMO all the time, but Guy's Burgers cannot be beat. And it's kind of frustrating because when you cruise Carnival, which I have done often, not as much lately, that's a long story, but when you cruise Carnival, you know Guy's Burgers seems to kind of have weird, erratic hours. So some folks were calling them out online saying Carnival should just hire more crew and extend the hours because Carnival cruisers love Guy's Burgers and the hours again are weird. So Heald's response was surprisingly detailed, and he does a good job of this. I think he's really great at communicating with cruisers. The cruise starts hours before opening to prep food. They serve a staggering number of burgers every single sea day, especially. And by the time they close and sanitize, they have worked a full shift under maritime labor laws that now require strict digital tracking of every hour. So you can't just add bodies mid-voyage. But here's the part that he made sure to emphasize. The burgers, they're free. A competing cruise line, he didn't name names, but there are some cruise lines, Royal Caribbean, that charges extra for their burgers and keeps the venue open later. So Carnival's trade-off here is shorter hours for zero cost. Now, of course, that's their defense, but my argument is, why don't you just hire more people? Oh yeah, that's right. They want to juice their bottom line. So if you love Guys, plan to hit it at lunch, not dinner, and note that that trade-off is deliberate. And I love some Guys burgers. And you know what? Sometimes maybe absence makes the heart grow fonder, and maybe in a way, the fact that Guys is not available at nighttime makes you love it even more at lunch. Now, in less savory Carnival news, they've been up to some bad things. Alaska regulators revealed this week that Carnival Corporation has been withholding water pollution data for months. Now, this is the same company whose ships logged over 750 pollution violations in 2023 and 2024 using open loop scrubbers in Alaskan waters. And I took an Alaskan cruise on Carnival last summer. It makes me feel kind of bad about it. I love cruising, but I'll be the first to call out there's two majorly problematic things with cruising. One is the exploitation with labor, as we kind of just discussed with the Guy's Burger thing. And two is the massive environmental impact. Now, the state has been asking for wastewater data, and Carnival's just like, nope, we're not gonna give it to you. So if you're booking an Alaskan cruise this summer, this probably won't change your itinerary tomorrow, but it's a kind of regulatory standoff that might lead to stricter port rules down the line. The waters you're paying to see are the same ones being affected, and the company responsible is stalling on the data that would show exactly how much. And now, in a little bit of lighter Carnival news, a video from Carnival Breeze just blew up on TikTok, and the timing is perfect. A woman's boyfriend had arranged for the wait staff to bring out a ring at dinner, but the crew being very enthusiastic. They jumped the gun and they started singing "Happy Engagement to You" to the tune of "Happy Birthday to You" before he had actually gotten down on one knee. So the girl's like, what is going on? Oh my God. He's like, what's going on? Oh my God. So he rolled with the punches. He still proposed. Thankfully, yay, she said yes. So if you're planning a cruise proposal, wink, wink, botsy on a boat, that's my man. Maybe give the dining crew a heads up on the exact timing, or at least make sure you're already on one knee before the singing starts.